Hello, hello. Here is Aage again coming to you from 44 different platforms all around the world. And this is the Paranormal World Show. And we're going to have some fun tonight again because I have a wonderful guest with me, one that has a really, really interesting experience or two or three that she will tell you about. And yeah, I am Aage, and I'll be the host for this show. And we are we're on 44 different platforms, and that is 3 TV stations, Roku, and a whole horde of social media, so you can find us just about anywhere. If you want to get a hold of me, a good place to go is to go to broadcastteamalpha.com, and it's a site there where you can send me a message, and I'll get the message and I'll get back to you, and we'll have a communication. And also, I want to let you know about Nori and I put together a spiritual think tank. We do incredible things there. It seems like sometimes we create out of seemingly nothing, because we found out how you can communicate with the universal mind or the quantum existence, or for those of you religious people out there, God. There's a way to do that, but the normal religions don't teach you, but we do. So if you're interested in something like that, just find a way to be part of something bigger than yourself. Send us a message in an email to the mastermindconnection@gmail.com, and we'll send you some information, and we will send you a link so you can come and join us. And also, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, that's the place to be, because we can also participate with you. You can ask questions, and we'll be in the chat room, so we can have a conversation in the chat room. We don't monitor other platforms because some of them don't have chat rooms, but we do on YouTube, so hope to see you there. And I want to introduce the guest to you. It's a lady, yeah, right here in Tucson, where I am. And her name is Kim Lincoln. She do something that is a little different. She works with the spiritual aspects of people and the universe. And she is a counselor in many different ways, and she'll mention some of about that in just a little bit. But she also had a near-death experience that she wants to talk about, and not just one. But this is going to be interesting because there are thousands and thousands of people out there that have had near-death experiences, but they hardly ever talk about it because of the stigma that goes along with it, because most people, that is all tied up in the being an earthborn soul, they don't believe in stuff like that until they have one themselves. That changes things. So I want to welcome to the show Kim Lincoln. Welcome here.
Thank you, Aage.
Yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
this is going to be fun because near-death experiences is something that we hear about ever so often. And for myself, whenever I hear somebody that have had one, I want to know, what was it? Because the rumor on the street, is that sooner or later we're going to end up doing something similar when we don't need the body anymore. And it is kind of important to know what to expect. It can be many different things for different people, but let's hear about your experience, because I heard it and it really rang a chord with me.
Thank you.
Let
Yeah.
us know, let us know what was it before? What brought it on, and maybe during the experience? And let's also tell us a little bit about what was it coming back from that wonderful place.
Yeah. That's a lot right there, all of that.
Yeah.
Anyone could be weeks. Um, well, I'll just begin a little bit with my past.
Mhm.
And from the time I was a very young child, I remember my first experience that was embodied and paranormal. And it was two white lions sitting next to me on the playroom floor.
Mm.
And I was, I don't know, somewhere between 2.5 and 3. And I had decided to fly, and I flew off the balcony of a 2.5-story flat and was in the hospital all day with a concussion. And when I came home, I remember sitting in a pool of sunlight, and I watched these two lions as though they're coming through an envelope, through a fold through the sunbeams. And they circled me, and then they sat with me. And at that point in my life was the first time I felt that kind of love, like a benevolence
Yeah.
and support. And something about that experience, I could just call it the timeless now, because it felt like it lasted forever. But I imagine it wasn't very long at all. But the presence was immense. And from that period on, I was able to see disembodied souls, hauntings. I used to clear houses when I was younger of murders and suicides, and talk to the spirits and help remove them. And then I realized that's not my life work. It came naturally, but my life work is helping people to be in touch with their soul. And I've known that from a very young time. Subsequently, I trained, I'm 70 now, so my first training in somatic work was in my 20s. So we all think somatic work is new. We're talking the early 70s now. And that's when I began my training, and I continued training in a lot of modalities: somatic work, trauma work, again, when it was very new and really unheard of, spiritual psychology, and a lot of different methodologies of body work and subtle energy work. So that's my background and some of my history and how I came here. So what I would say is I didn't have a sense of fear, in the way that I ran around afraid all the time. I didn't. The experience with the lions and the interdimensional connections, I felt a sense of safety in the world. But when I moved to San Francisco from the suburbs as an 18-year-old, I moved into a really dangerous neighborhood, and I didn't have a barometer developed that let me know maybe that would be a good place to leave. And so, yeah, that's where it happened. I was in a flat. Yeah, if anybody knows San Francisco in the early 70s, 72, 73, yeah, that was Hayes Valley. It was a rough area. Yeah. So there was a knock on my door, and I had a feeling in my gut not to answer the door. And it was just like, don't answer the door. Right.
Hmm.
And I talked myself out of it in my mind. I mentalized over it. Like, what would I be afraid of? You know, I asked who it was on the other side. They say, hi, we're your neighbors. We've seen you going in and out. We have a question. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I opened the door. And before I knew it, it was a couple, a man and a woman, and they were very tall. And they began just pushing me back and forth in front of them. But that came later. There was a whole conversation before where they asked for a glass of water. I went into the kitchen, came back, and in the reflection of the mirror, I saw that they had some of my possessions under their coat.
Oh, you got robbed too.
I was robbed
Yeah.
and I was beaten up quite severely. I had stitches under my tongue to tie my tongue back down from being gagged with so much force. And I was just black, blue, and purple all the way through. But what happened, they ended up strangling, first choking me on the floor, but then they actually went behind with the cord and strangled me.
Wow. Now you had no idea. You were in a strange neighborhood. You didn't know anybody.
Right.
Why would you open the door? That was, you talked yourself out of it because you came from safety and you just
Yeah.
still had some of those feelings in you that things are going to be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though my instinct said no, I overrode my instinct, that gut feeling.
Yeah.
The body does not lie. And that got me into somatic training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they strangled you and probably bound your hands or
Mm-hmm.
so
My
to
hands.
restrain you first, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They tied my hands and feet actually all together, like hogtied behind me. And because I was a dancer, 20 years, I took ballet for years, gymnastics, I was very flexible and it was just like an arch. And then they took what was around my ankles and wrists and included my neck and just cinched everything together backwards. And so of course I began passing out and I was gagged. So I couldn't breathe. And then tremendous fear overtook me because all along they were holding a knife to my eyes and talking about carving my skin off and taking my eyes. I mean, it was pretty gruesome and terrifying. And so then the fear just overtook me and I was in a panic.
Yeah.
So I was in a very dark, terrified space. And I could still hear, but I couldn't see. Even though my eyes were open, I couldn't see. Everything was black,
Yeah.
right? Losing oxygen and all of
Yeah.
that. So as I began going under, everything was just pounding and the pressure was unbelievable. And I was fighting what was appearing to be a dying process. And I was terrified
Yeah.
of them coming back and finishing the job. And I was in so much grief, I didn't want to leave my life. I finally was free from home, Right.
Oh boy.
I felt like my life hadn't even begun,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to leave. But what was happening, I was shutting down, and I could actually hear my organs struggling. And it was amazing because I was very body conscious. I could hear the sounds and feel the feelings and know what that meant, right? And so I'm tracking myself shutting down. Um, and then there came a point where I just went out the top of my head, and I could feel my soul leaving the body. And it's quite a struggle when the soul, is coming out of the body, and then it's just like released, right? And it just went into this immense darkness. And it was a heavy, like a darkness that was a dull black, right? And it just felt forever, and I felt totally alone. And so as I'm talking through this, what was the learning as I go along? Is that something to talk about or talk about later?
Let's go through the experience because it leads to something that a lot of people will experience. It's not uncommon that people find themselves in darkness. A
Right.
lot, a lot of people talk about that, but they also know and they find out how to get out of that into
Yeah.
something else. And that's what you did. So let's hear that.
Yes. And so first it was the dull dark. It was that long tunnel with the light at the end, and then boom, I went into that. And then I went into a radiant darkness. So it shifted from this dull darkness into a black that had a sheen to it. It was completely different. And in that darkness, two spirits or angelic forms came up and flanked my side and began lifting with me in it. I say lifting because it felt like that, like there was an ascension of some kind. And these beings, when I looked over, they had radiance in them, but it's almost like they were translucent, right? And in the darkness, everything looked dark, but I could see the light in the dark. And so, we could call that the void or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then from there, I had multiple experiences. One experience was then coming out of that, a gathering of energy, and it felt like a gathering of energy from galaxies or the whole universe, right? Just this immense magnetism that gathered and concentrated energy and then shot up into another realm. And eventually it took me through a realm that was like a mandala, right? With like a core in the center. And this mandala was like archways of like prisms of color. And then this opening in the middle. And there was a point where these guides or angelic forms stayed with me until I went through that part, and that I did alone. And then went through that and came out eventually. And that took me to a whole other realm that was white and golden light. Um, there was, whew,
You probably get the feelings coming back now when you talk about it.
I do, and it just brings gratitude,
Yeah.
just this sadness that we're not here all the time, and the preciousness of getting to have that experience. And coming into that realm was the first time since I was that young 2.5, 3-year-old, where I felt the benevolence of the white lions, that I felt that benevolent love. And
Hmm.
it was incredible. And then I began to see there was almost like ocean waves of roiling or clouds moving, that were like pulling to an area, a concentration again, but that concentration then expanded. And I felt like I was at the edge, wanting to get into it. And there was this urge of asking to come in. And then this booming voice that I heard said, "It's not your time." And that's when everything, it was just as though a cord was cut, and I just fell back to the density of my body. And the contrast was so shocking that there was this ecstatic euphoria. And then I fell into this pain-filled, dull, dense, trapped
Oh,
sensation.
wow.
and I was overcome with grief, because it was a near-death experience, meaning I came back to a body, and the police were there. My boyfriend at the time was there. Apparently he had called the police because I didn't show up for work, and he was worried and knew the neighborhood I lived in. And so
Okay, so this lasted for quite a while then.
it must have, because he had long enough to be worried.
Yeah.
I was just getting ready to walk out the door when there was a knock on my door to go to work.
So you could have been in that state, that death state, for
Mhm.
maybe a couple of hours.
That is possible.
Mhm. Well, then they also tell us that if
I
the brain,
never thought of that.
yeah, if the brain doesn't get oxygen for more than a few minutes, then you end up with brain damage. But you
Well,
you didn't have any of that.
um, well, I did. Um, in a sense, not in a sense, there definitely was brain trauma
Okay.
with all of that. And it was, I had just gotten accepted into a dance company, a modern dance company. And the rehearsals were really severe. And there was a period, then there was a car accident after that. And yeah, I think I overrode my body. It didn't get enough time to heal from that experience. So the car accident compounded with the stress of overriding the trauma. Literally collapsed me. I could barely walk for quite a long time.
Mm. Yeah, and then when you were out, did you see anybody? These two, you call them angels, but
Yeah,
did you see anybody else?
I did. Um, There were two times. One was as I was feeling I'm dying,
Mhm.
and I was still more conscious. And as I'm going into that, I'm telling my family and friends and people I knew how much I loved them
Okay.
and that I was sorry to go. And they were present. And when I went through to that golden realm, that golden white realm,
Mhm.
there were throngs and throngs. I mean, it,
So,
it
the,
was thousands. I mean, it was just all around. There were beings away from me,
Mhm.
but at my periphery in every direction.
What did those people look like? Did they look like you, or were they taller, or what?
Everything. They
Hmm?
were human,
Hmm.
and some were taller and translucent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, at that,
They
that
weren't, yeah,
at that stage, you were probably also translucent.
likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So you came back with a memory of this, and I am sure that this memory has something to do with what you're doing today because of your learning experience.
did it, that memory created or awakened
Mhm.
within me an urgency to do the work that I'm doing now.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what it was or how I would learn it,
Mhm.
but I knew I had to participate and be a part of it.
Now, you also said that you had another NDE, near-death experience. Is
Yeah,
there anything important in that one that will also help to commit you to doing what you do now?
it did. Um, Both of those happened when I was younger, and both were in water. When I was a little kid, I must have been, 10, and diving into a swimming pool, and my sisters and I playing tag to touch the drain at the bottom of the pool, touch it and then push off. Who can get back up to the surface fastest, right? And I dove down and I touched it. And as I turned, my pinky finger got caught in the drain.
Ooh.
And I had turned and I couldn't get my finger out of the drain. And I'm down there with my feet against the bottom of the pool, trying to pull myself free. And I kept thinking, you know, I'm losing my breath by now and really panicking and feeling like I was going to drown. The pressure in my lungs was immense and the pain in my head. And then I heard surrender. And I just let everything go and let my body go limp. And my body turned and my finger rotated and I floated out.
Ah.
So that was an important lesson. And this theme went through all three NDEs.
Mm.
The second one, I was 11, visiting Southern California, the beach, and I stepped off. I walked out into the ocean and it dropped, and a riptide grabbed me and just sucked me. It just pulled me right underwater. And it happened so fast. And again, I panicked and I tried to fight my way out of it. And in that struggle, again, I heard surrender. In other words, for this, it meant surrender and accept the death.
Mm.
And so again, there was like that tunnel and the white light, right? And I went limp and the riptide pulled me out to sea. And then like a cork released me. I just went boop and just popped to the surface. So
And
this surrender allowed me.
so when you popped to the surface, you were able to breathe again? Or had you drowned so you couldn't?
I popped to the surface and I was heaving and buckets of water were coming out. Yeah, it was intense. But there was the tunnel and the bright white light and peace all the way through that. And then I was released. And it's like, oh my God, I'm on top of the water now. Like I came to. So I feel those were test runs for the big one when I was 18. The really scary one.
Yeah.
And all three had the same message, which was surrender, the struggle, which is something I work with a lot in my work now, especially people who have had traumatic experiences and are caught still in that nervous system loop.
Mhm. So what you learn from those three experiences probably helps shape what you are teaching now.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Yes. More than believe it, I know it deeply. That in a way I had to have the experiences to understand those experiences.
So
And
yeah, that now I can see it because it was in your life plan probably to have those experiences so you could have the experience and learn from it so you would be able to help others that had similar or related experiences.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I had a lot of trauma as a child. Um, but those three were so defining because the message,
Yeah.
each time it was between me and me,
Mhm.
not, once like as the 18-year-old and in the ocean and in the pool, there came a point in all of those experiences, even though there was other, meaning the water or people, ultimately it was between me and me. And
Mhm.
the lift trauma of my mother was bipolar, diagnosed bipolar schizophrenic. So that was difficult for a child to navigate,
Yeah.
right? But she was trying her best to improve herself, which is how I got into so much work,
Yeah.
right? Doing the Fisher-Hoffman process with her when I'm a teenager and
Mhm.
looking at the negative traits of my mother, living with
Yeah.
my mother, right? And the positive, and seeing my conditioning. So looking at conditioning and starting that work fairly, very young.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a divine design that we each have. If we can get beyond the trauma drama of the experience and the story and retelling the story and look at what is the lesson, what is the learning, what do I bring from that to inform my life in a
Mhm.
positive way?
A lot of people have these experiences, and some of them, all they see is that darkness. And
Yeah,
then suddenly they find them back in the body. They may still, even though they had the experience, they may still a little fear about dying again because that's all they've seen. But if they had, like you say, let go, surrender, they may have gotten out of that and found the tunnel and gone to the light and come through and found out at the other side also that, yep, it's not your time. You got to go back. You got more work to do.
right. Um, that's a really important point that you're bringing up because um, what I realized in, I call it the big experience at 18 with
Mhm.
the strangulation, that I realized in it and coming and later, and that unpacked for decades after. It took a long time to really unpack um, the significance and the depth and the nuances of that. But what it showed me is what I was experiencing in the black were um, the fixated version of the mind
Mhm.
versus the higher mind or the divinity, the spirit, right? And
Yeah.
learning to perceive from our higher self and not just define our experience from the lower mind. And the lower mind is the animal mind.
Yeah.
That's the first part of our brain that develops, right?
Mhm.
And it's not who we are, but it is what we do until we become conscious of what we're doing and practice to
Yeah.
shift.
And then there are others too that have had these kinds of experiences. They find themselves through the tunnel, they meet someone that could be a relative, that could be a spouse, or strangers that in angelic form. And they can come back and say, it felt like I was there for weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah, time does not exist there. So it could be
that's
like they were there, they were learning, they're doing things, and then that after weeks they thought, oh well, um, it's not your time, so you really got to go back. Now they
yeah,
probably haven't been dead a week or two here, but it's just almost like it could be maybe a few minutes here that expresses itself as weeks on the other side.
yeah. For me, it felt timeless.
Mhm.
There was no sense of time. You know, you hear many talk about the eternal now, and
Yeah,
I've had many, many. I mean, that's the practice I help assist people with. I mentor people to
yeah.
access that part of themselves, right? Like you too. I love your work.
Yeah, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
only way to do it, and you do, and I see now that we're a little after the bottom of the hour, so I want to tell and talk to the people that joined us late. We're talking with Kim Lincoln. She's an author in. She is talking about her near-death experience, and she's writing about some of this, and a little bit here she's going to show you a couple of books that she wrote that you probably should get your hands on because the rumor on the street is that sooner or later we're going to have to experience some of this,
yeah,
all of us. And it would be nice to know what it could be like. So it's not uncharted territory anymore.
yeah,
Do you think?
yeah, yeah. No, I don't know that there's any way around it.
Yeah, I know there are, I know that because I believe I have talked to one that said he was immortal. And I think that's probably a little bit outside of what people's reference. So I think we're going to stick with the rumor on the street for now to educate ourselves.
Well, I think, yes,
Yeah.
there
Oh,
are those who are in that state. And of course, we all are
mhm,
ultimately. And but I think for the average person, with the conditioning we've had in society and the strong belief systems that, yeah, that we've been raised in, the
yeah.
limitations,
Mhm,
then yeah, some pointers are helpful along the way,
yeah.
a little roadmap.
Yeah. That experience, or those experiences that you had, was they're tremendous, and they made a very serious impact on you. And what you learned there, are you brought forward, and you are now helping other people with traumas and things. Talk about that. What in fact, how can you help other people that have had these experiences and don't know what to do with it and don't understand what happened?
Yeah, the body remembers. And so a lot of the work I do, um, well, I'll just say a little bit about the work.
Yeah.
My work that I began training in, and actually 17 was my first formal training, right? Um, but the work includes somatic experience, trauma consciousness, meaning being conscious of the trauma and learning to
Yeah.
work with that edge in the nervous system, right?
Mhm.
And the limited beliefs around it for some people, right? Some people
Yeah.
get stuck or frozen or fixated in a part of it. I was fortunate, I got to go through many dimensions and, um, all the way through and back. So what I would say my experience, the last one really laid out a template for me to work from. And I have a whole course that works with the dark night of the soul, the journey course. And
Mhm.
it starts with the beginning, the fall from grace, right? The separation from source energy into a limited form, the body, and then the ego identity that forms in the shell, right, of that. And then the cracking open of the truth, how that informs us and begins to dissolve the shell, but that's a tricky edge because
Mhm.
that's where a lot of
Yeah.
trauma can get activated and needs to be worked with consciously and
Yeah.
slowly and consistently to create a new ground, right?
Mhm.
And then the spirituality, um, the union again. So working with the dualistic aspect of mind and the oneness, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was too
Yeah.
esoteric, but that's the work.
Mhm.
So I help people in the beginning to be in touch with their body. Really simple. Like when they say something, where do you sense that? And what is that feeling? And then to develop the awareness of using all five senses. And first, there may be the coarseness of the senses. In time, it becomes more refined, and the sensorial aspect of our awareness becomes perceptual.
Yeah.
Right? And then the perceptual evolves into
Okay.
something larger.
So it learns from itself.
It learns from itself.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so it's like we're co-creating with Creator, in a sense, with creation.
In your work, have you run into a lot of other people or some other people that also have had near-death experiences?
Not well, not that many. Um, I work with all kinds of people. There have been people that come to me from satanic abuse, from a lot of abandonment as a child, from abusive or addictive behaviors, right? And when I am working with people like that, I do want to make sure that they have a network, that they have professionals they're working with, and that we can all communicate if needed. I really love
Yeah.
it if a person has a team, and then we're working with the different aspects of that person to help them integrate.
Yeah, sometimes when someone has a trauma, and it could be one of those in the fringes of things that it's hard to understand, and then their brother-in-law, come and say, that never happened. You're nuts. You're just crazy, that's all. And the more they hear that, they start believing some of it and they withdraw. And you can help them solve that problem and maybe bring them back out again to
Yeah.
sometimes they need to go back to their brother-in-law and say, hey, bud, you're wrong.
And they get
But
to be themselves
yeah,
and own the truth of their experience and the learning of that, and blossom
yeah,
in their life. Yeah. And that's the reward of doing this work,
yeah.
getting to see people grow
Mhm.
is extraordinary. And I'm sure you see that too with people you work with.
Yeah, there is. I think everybody, almost absolutely everybody, have some form of experience that could be interpreted to be trauma.
Mhm.
So if it's a small one or a big one,
Yeah.
there could be possibly the same solution for the both of them, because
Yeah.
there may be just a little bit of understanding that can create the resolve.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah,
And very simple practice.
yeah.
Mhm. But practice, as we know, needs to be practiced.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you have written a couple of books also. If you have them there, could you
Mhm.
show them to us?
Sure. This is the first one I wrote, 2016, Wholly Here, Wholly You,
Mhm.
right? Discovering your authentic self. And one of my students did this painting,
Oh,
and she's now, I've trained her as a practitioner, and now she's actually teaching some of the courses I developed. And this book is that whole story. It's from the beginning to the end. And so it's all the stages of, we could say, self-realization, self-actualization, whatever terminology people want to call that, but we would say healthy autonomy and
mhm.
individuation from unconscious patterns that
Yeah.
control their lives, and becoming
Mhm.
more conscious. And so at first I thought I would use different students as examples in this book. And then I realized well, I might as well do it because I've
Yeah.
had all those experiences. And so in it are snippets. So it's like little vignettes, and then there's lessons and activities, and then another vignette. And then in the end, they all come together.
Mhm.
But it's the stages of self-knowing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, reading something like that, I think you're going to get to know yourself a lot better than what you did before.
Yeah. Yeah. And the book has brought people to my classes or for personal work.
Okay.
Yeah. Many people say, well, when I lived in Olympia, I had it in some stores there. They'd say, oh, it just jumped off the shelf into my hands.
Hmm. Yeah,
Right.
that happens.
Yeah. Now it's online. I stopped doing the work of trying to get it in stores because
Yeah, it's Amazon.
it's Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, there you can search for the title, but maybe the easier way to just put your name in the search bar and then click, and then it all comes up, right?
Yeah, if they Google Kim Lincoln
Yeah.
and essence work or essence or
Yeah.
authenticity, it should come up.
If someone comes to you with a really difficult trauma, how do you start out? Because it probably is not going to be solved in 20 minutes, so it'll take a while. How do you start out working with those people to bring them back to normalcy again?
Well, the first thing is I'm going to notice where they are. If they're speaking from a distance, from outside of their body, more dissociated, or if they're in their body but stuck in an area,
Mhm.
right? So I'm going to begin to bring their awareness to their speech
Mhm.
and what they're feeling and where that is.
Yeah.
And just begin to bring them into the mapping. So they learn their map of their body because we're each different
Yeah.
in how we organize our experiences.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not easy, but some part of it, I know from personal experience, I had something happen and I was dwelling on it all the time, and
Mhm.
it made that negative bubble bigger and bigger until I figured it out that the more I think about it, the more it's going to stay with me because the neural network will lock it into that loop.
Exactly. It becomes fixated or
Yeah.
station, right?
So,
Exactly.
yeah, and I think there's someone wiser than me that said, when you when you think about something different, things change. The facts change. Everything about it change when you start thinking about it different, or maybe
Right.
not thinking about it at all.
Right. Well, if there's trauma, it continues to live in the body.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful not to bypass it,
Mhm.
right? Or to deny it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a careful navigation around all of that so that um, I give people little experience, help them with little experiences of shifts and help them to notice the shift and to value the shift.
Okay.
And in that shift, what arises is an essential quality that they disconnected from in the trauma if they're still fixated in the trauma. And so if a person is overthinking, perhaps, and in that loop, they have to come to the body.
Yeah.
or if somebody is just impulsively acting something out, like anger, strong emotions, and just in it, they have to open to the higher mind, to the witness, right? And so what I'm looking at are the three centers: the mental, the emotional, and physical, right? And those are they call it three parts of the brain, the triune brain. But these three centers have existed for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Many ancient teachings.
What about the fourth center, the mind? Yeah,
That's the integration,
yeah,
is the great mind, not the little overthinker.
yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, the mind, universal mind, the free mind.
Mhm.
And we practice accessing that through the witness and observing
Yeah,
and feeling strong sensations without making up a story or enacting them. But with trauma, there can be a momentum, and then the person just boom right into the trauma vortex. Then we want to gently bring them back out and just titrate that edge,
yeah.
and so they can learn to navigate that.
I see we are getting down towards the end here, but let people know where they can reach you.
And I have another book.
Yeah.
I'll just quickly say this book, Soul Power, You Loving You. Look at this. It's so easy.
Oh,
Each
gosh.
page, it's so easy.
My kind of
And
book.
yeah, and some people just read one page a day. So there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Hmm.
Um,
When you work with someone, do you give them homework, kind of like things they need to do and practice at home in order to restructure their neural network so it reaches into the brain or the chemical factory of the brain that release the healing chemicals?
yes, yeah. Often at the end of the session, I'll remind people to practice that. Some people I give assignments, depends on the person
Mm-hmm.
and where they're at and what they're up to. Yeah. Some people I'll have them pay attention to their dreams.
Yeah.
It again, it's individual
Mm-hmm.
for the person I'm working with.
No, good, good. Yeah, let them know where they can reach you so that
Really simple, kimlincoln.com.
okay.
kimlincoln.com and
That's simple.
contact page, my books and connection to my other website for the school.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That is good. Now, here I got a question. It's my favorite question that I like to ask the guests, and that is one that I didn't want to tell you beforehand because I want to blindside them. And then the question is, if you could talk to the whole world and the world is listening, what would you tell them?
Be the love that you are. Be true to your nature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That
Thank you,
is good.
Audrey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I,
we are down to the end here. So I thank you very much for being with us, Kim. And this is something that, like I said before, the rumor is we're all going to experience this someday. Wouldn't it make sense to know a little bit about that other place or what can happen? Go check out her books.
thank you. Sneak previews for what's
Yeah,
to come.
there you go. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. And for all of you out there listening and watching, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe and check the bell so you can see when the next video is coming out. And Until then, be good to each other.